I've been debating whether to share this for a while. I still feel the sting of the terror I went through, and it's something I don't talk about much. It happened a few years ago, but I still don't know if it was just an unfortunate series of events or something darker at play. So, here's the story. Back when this happened, I was in my early 20s, traveling across the country. I'd just gotten out of college, and I wanted to take a road trip to clear my head before starting a 9-to-5 job. I set out alone, packed my stuff, and hit the open road. I was feeling free, excited to experience new places, and not really thinking much about safety or what could go wrong. Mistake number 1. I was on an isolated stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, somewhere in the middle of the US, between two small towns. The sun was beginning to set, and I'd been driving for hours with no real signs of civilization around. Not many cars had passed, and honestly, I felt like I was driving through a ghost town. The radio was on, playing some classic rock, and I was just enjoying the solitude when suddenly, my car started making an awful sound. It sputtered and jerked, and within seconds, it completely shut off. No warning, nothing. I pulled over, checked the gas tank. It was fine. I tried restarting the engine. Nothing. No matter what I did, it wouldn't start. I checked my phone for service, but of course, I was in one of those dead zones. No reception. I thought about walking to the nearest town, but I had no idea how far away that was, and I wasn't exactly excited to leave my car behind. I sat there for a few minutes, debating my options. There wasn't a soul in sight. I figured I'd try to hitchhike to the nearest town or flag someone down if I was lucky. I looked at the road, hoping a car would pass by. And then, just when I was beginning to lose hope, I saw headlights in the distance. A truck was coming my way. My heart lifted, thinking that maybe I'd finally get some help. The truck pulled up beside me, and the driver rolled down his window. The first thing I noticed was that he was alone. That was a good sign, right? It wasn't a group of people, just one man. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, clean-shaven with short hair. He wore a baseball cap and had a deep, gravelly voice when he spoke. "You broke down, huh?" he asked. I nodded, feeling both relief and a bit of caution. I didn't know this guy, but what else could I do? Yeah, I'm stuck. I don't really know what's wrong with the car. It just died on me. "Well, you're a long way from help," he said, glancing around. "I live just up the road a few miles. We'll hook you up to the back of the truck. I'll give you a hand with your car." It wasn't ideal, but I was desperate. And honestly, I didn't want to walk in the dark along the side of the road. I agreed, and we hooked up the car. The truck led the way. As we drove, the road got even more desolate. The trees seemed to close in around us, and the wind howled as the temperature dropped. The darkness was settling in fast, and I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that started to grow in my gut. After a while, the truck took a sharp turn off the main road onto an even narrower path. We went for a few more miles, and the landscape began to look more and more abandoned. Old, decaying houses dotted the sides of the road. A few of the houses had broken windows, and the area had that run-down, abandoned vibe. We eventually came to a stop in front of a run-down house. It looked like it had been abandoned for years. Boards nailed over the windows, and the yard was overgrown with weeds. There was a barn in the back, and the place looked like it was falling apart. I felt my heart race, but I tried to stay calm. I convinced myself it was just an old house, and he'd probably help me out quickly so I could be on my way. But something about it, something about the way he had been acting, made my instincts scream for me to leave. I didn't trust him. He got out of the truck and walked toward the house, and I hesitated for a moment. But what choice did I have? I followed him up to the door, trying to ignore the unease settling in my stomach. The door creaked open, and we went inside. The interior was dim, with barely any furniture. It looked like a place someone had moved out of years ago. The floors creaked as we walked, and the smell in the house was off, like old, stagnant air. There was no TV, no pictures, no decorations. It felt lifeless. "Just take a seat," he said, gesturing to an old chair by a dusty table. "I'll get you something to drink." I sat, but I wasn't comfortable. My body was on high alert now. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was something off about this whole situation, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in danger. As I sat there, I noticed something strange. There was a heavy, metallic smell in the air, almost like blood or iron. I tried to breathe through my mouth, but it didn't help. My eyes darted around the room, searching for anything that could explain the feeling of dread I had. A few minutes later, he returned with 2 glasses. One was for me, and the other one was for himself. He handed me the glass with a smile, but there was something unsettling about it. He didn't seem like the kind of guy who'd offer a drink without an ulterior motive. My instincts were screaming at me to leave. I tried to politely decline the drink, but he insisted. "It's just water. You've had a rough day. Don't want to keep you too long." I hesitated, but then thought, what's the worst that could happen? He handed me the glass with a smile, but there was something off about it. I wasn't sure what it was exactly. Maybe how quickly he poured it, or how intently he watched me take it. He sat across from me, his own glass untouched. I lifted mine to my lips, pretending to sip. I let just a bit touch my tongue before putting it down slowly. It was just water, but the metallic taste, or maybe my imagination, was enough. Then he asked, "So where were you headed again?" I gave a vague answer, something about a campsite I'd passed earlier, and he just nodded. That's when I noticed something on the floor by the kitchen. A second pair of boots, larger, dirtier, not his. I realized then, he hadn't been alone here recently. "I should probably get going," I said quickly, standing up. He didn't move at first, just looked at me for a second too long. "Don't be silly. You're not going anywhere tonight. Your car's toast, remember?" My heart dropped. He hadn't even looked under the hood. I never told him what was wrong with my car. That was it. That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't safe here. I forced a smile and said, "Actually, I've got a friend who was expecting me an hour ago. She's going to call in a welfare check if I don't check in soon." That made him pause. His eyes narrowed just slightly. I grabbed my bag from the chair and walked quickly toward the door. He followed a few steps behind me, saying nothing. When I reached the front steps, I turned and added, "Thanks for the water. I'll come back in the morning if I still need help." I booked it to my car, heart racing, keys in hand. I don't even remember if I closed the door behind me. I just knew I had to get out of there. I jumped into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and shoved the key into the ignition. Nothing. Just a slow click. My stomach dropped. I tried again. Same sound. I looked up and saw the front door of the house still slightly open. I couldn't tell if he was coming after me, but it felt like I was running out of time. I turned the key again, once, twice, and then finally gave the gas a bit of a pump and turned it hard. The engine sputtered, caught, then stalled again. One more try. It roared to life, rough but running. I didn't wait. I threw it into reverse, backed down the dirt road as fast as I could, gravel flying behind me. I didn't stop to check if he was following. I just drove for nearly an hour. Eventually, I reached a gas station with lights and people. And finally, some cell signal. I called the sheriff's office, voice shaking, and told them everything. They said they'd send someone out to check. The next day, an officer called me back. The house was there, run down, abandoned, but there were no signs of anyone living in it. They found 2 sets of fresh footprints leading from the woods behind the barn. They also found a pile of half-burnt clothes, just scraps of fabric and ash. They said they would let me know if they had any updates. I've never been able to stop thinking about this. The guy, the house, the weird smell, the water, the almost broken down car. It kept replaying in my head like I missed some crucial detail. I started digging online, trying to make sense of what had happened, looking for news reports or local crime alerts near that area. That's when I stumbled across a thread about something called the High Desert Disappearances. A string of people, mostly travelers and solo campers, who went missing in parts of Nevada, Utah, and Eastern California over the last few decades. All of them vanished near remote highways. Most of them were never found. A few cars were discovered abandoned, and 1 or 2 people were last seen at gas stations not far from where I broke down. One post mentioned a woman who went missing in 2016 after stopping to help a stranded driver. Another described a man who left his vehicle to walk for help and was never seen again. A backpack was found years later, half buried near an old mining road. No suspects, no resolution, just gone. The really unsettling part, one of the descriptions from a trucker who claimed to see a man matching the missing woman's last known companion, sounded almost exactly like the guy I met. Baseball cap, gravelly voice, driving an old white pickup truck. I showed the article to a friend. They shrugged it off, said I was probably just shaken up, seeing patterns that aren't there, and maybe they're right. But part of me wonders, what if he's still out there? What if that house wasn't his, but just one of many? What if I wasn't the first person he offered help to? I don't have proof, just a gut feeling and a close call I still dream about sometimes. If you're ever out on those endless desert roads and a friendly stranger offers you help, please think twice. Trust your instincts. If you're stuck in a remote area, it's tempting to accept help, but it's safer to wait for official help or use a roadside assistance service if available. Always inform a friend or family member about your travel plans. Share your route, expected arrival time, and your check-in points. This ensures someone will know if something goes wrong or if you're delayed. I share my location whenever possible, and I always check my car before long drives now, especially when heading into isolated areas, and I keep emergency supplies with me. Be safe out there, guys. I've been on a solo road trip for the past few days, and some weird stuff has been happening that I can't explain. It started off like any normal trip, just me, my car, and the open road. I've always loved the freedom of driving through quiet highways, especially through the less traveled parts of the country. But now I'm wondering if I made a huge mistake. So, it all started on day 3. I was in New Mexico, just outside of Belen, heading south toward a scenic route I'd read about online. It's a beautiful area, mostly desert with long stretches of open road. I was planning to take the scenic route through the mountains and then camp for the night. I had my playlist going, windows down, soaking in the quiet. Everything was perfect, but then I made a wrong turn. I ended up on a small, narrow road that wasn't on my GPS. The road was kind of a mix of dirt and gravel, with hardly any signs or landmarks. I wasn't too worried, just figured I'd end up on a bigger road eventually. But as I kept driving, I started feeling off. It wasn't like I was scared, but more like something just wasn't right. Maybe it was the silence. It was eerie, the kind of silence you only get in remote places. No cars, no animals, just my tires crunching against the gravel and the occasional whistle of wind. I felt like I was being watched, but that seemed ridiculous. Who could be out here? As I drove, I saw a sign for a scenic overlook up ahead. I decided to pull over, stretch my legs, and get a good picture of the view. I've always enjoyed those moments, connecting with nature, even if it is only for a few minutes. The overlook was on a cliff, giving a panoramic view of the desert below. I took a few photos, but something about the place felt too quiet, too still. I didn't even hear birds singing. After about 15 minutes, I decided to get back into my car. The air felt heavy, and I just had this weird, growing sense of unease. As I walked back toward my car, I noticed something odd. There was a Polaroid stuck under my windshield wiper. I didn't remember seeing anyone around when I pulled in. I figured it was just some weird prank, but as soon as I took the photo into my hand, I froze. It was a picture of a young woman standing in front of a mountain, much like the ones I'd just driven past. She was wearing clothes that looked almost identical to mine. Same jacket, same dark jeans, and even the same sneakers I was wearing at that very moment. My stomach dropped. I shook my head, trying to dismiss it. Maybe it was just a coincidence, a prank like I thought. Maybe someone had been here earlier and took the photo of me without me realizing it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I checked the back of the Polaroid. Nothing. No date, no message, just the image. I tried to convince myself it wasn't a big deal. But why would someone leave it here for me? And how did they take that photo? I shoved the photo into the glove box, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach, and then started the car. I had a destination in mind, and I didn't want to let something as strange as this throw me off track. That's when I saw the car behind me. At first, I thought it was just another driver, but as I glanced into my rearview mirror, I noticed something weird. The car was too close, and it had been tailing me for a while. I checked the rear view again. Yeah, still there. The same dark-colored sedan. I tried to shake it off. Maybe they were just going the same way, but as I kept driving, the car stayed right behind me. No matter how many turns I made, no matter how fast I drove, it was always just there, maintaining the exact same distance. Every time I looked in my mirror, I saw it. I started getting paranoid. Maybe I was just being crazy. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But something about the way the car was following me felt deliberate. It wasn't like normal traffic. It felt like they were waiting for something, like they were following me on purpose. I turned onto a side road, hoping to lose them. The dirt road was narrow and winding, but the car stayed behind me, just a few car lengths away. I kept my speed up, hoping to get a bigger road soon, but as I took a sharp curve, the car was still there, uncomfortably close. At that point, I'd had enough. I wasn't just paranoid anymore. I was scared. I pulled off the side of the road into a small dirt lot, pretending to be parking. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to calm my racing heart. I stared ahead, watching the road, waiting to see if the car would pass. After what felt like an eternity, I slowly turned to glance in the rearview mirror. The sedan was parked a few yards away from me, facing the opposite direction. There was no way they had been there when I pulled over. I would have noticed. My blood ran cold. How had they gotten there so fast? I quickly started the engine again, not bothering to think things through. I threw the car into gear and sped back onto the main road, praying the sedan hadn't followed me. My hands were trembling on the wheel, but I forced myself to focus. I drove faster, making sharp turns, trying to lose the car. But each time I checked the rear view, it was still there, right behind me. The sedan. It was almost like it was taunting me, staying just close enough for me to see it, but never quite passing me. I swerved off the road again, hoping to find a more remote spot. But no matter where I turned, the sedan followed. Finally, I saw a sign for a small town a few miles ahead. Without thinking, I floored it and took a sharp exit, heading straight for the town. When I got there, I pulled into the first gas station I could find, my heart pounding. I rushed inside the store, hoping I wasn't being followed in. I tried to act normal, as if I hadn't just been terrified out of my mind, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I glanced outside, half expecting to see the sedan in the parking lot, but when I looked, it was gone. There was no sign of it. I waited in the store for about 20 minutes, watching through the windows, just to be sure. But I never saw the car again. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe it was all in my head. But that Polaroid, it still haunts me. How did they know what I was wearing? How did they find me? I haven't been able to shake the feeling that someone's out there, watching me. And now I don't know if I want to keep going on this trip. I've been checking my rear view constantly, convinced that I'm being followed. But every time I look, no one's there. I know it's probably nothing, but that Polaroid, it keeps coming back to me. Does anyone have advice? Should I just call it quits and head home? Or am I overthinking this? Thanks for listening. I'll be honest, I'm scared to check the comments, but if you've had any similar experiences or just want to offer some advice, I'd really appreciate it. A number of years ago, I went on a road trip by myself. I've always loved driving alone. I usually go on these trips to unwind and get away from the chaos of life. On this particular trip, I was exploring Arizona, a place I'd never been before, and I was excited to see the desert landscape. I had no destination. I just planned to wander and see where the road would take me. After a couple of days, I decided to venture off the main highway and see if I could find a cool little ghost town I'd read about online. It was supposed to be somewhere deep in the desert, not too far from the highway, but I figured I'd just take a random exit and go on my own little adventure. That's where things started to go wrong. It was mid-afternoon, and the sun was starting to dip a bit, casting long shadows over the empty road. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I should have paid attention to how isolated everything was. There were no other cars, no signs of life, just the wide-open desert stretching for miles. I took a left turn onto a smaller road, one that didn't look like it was used much. My GPS had a weak signal, but I wasn't worried about it. I had a paper map in the glove box, and figured I'd just follow my gut. For the first 30 minutes, everything was fine. I was enjoying the quiet, the beauty of the vast empty space. There was something calming about being out there, so far away from the world. But then I started noticing something strange. The landscape was starting to look familiar. At first, I brushed it off. I mean, how could I not? It's all just desert, right? The same sagebrush, the same dusty road, the same craggy rock formations, but as I kept driving, it became more obvious. I thought I saw the same hill on the horizon that I'd passed earlier, the same stretch of cracked pavement, the same broken-down fence on the side of the road. It was like I was stuck in a loop. I didn't say anything to myself at first. I thought maybe I was just tired, my eyes playing tricks on me. But I checked my map, and sure enough, I was still on the same road I turned onto earlier. And that's when the unease started to set in. I kept driving, telling myself I was just being paranoid, but the road kept looking more and more like it was repeating itself. The same curve in the road, the same outcropping of rocks, the same dry creek bed that I could have sworn I passed already. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. How could I be seeing the same thing over and over? Was I driving in circles? I checked my GPS again, but the signal was still spotty, and it was no help at all. I couldn't make sense of it. I'd been driving for at least an hour, and I was sure I'd seen this exact same stretch of road twice, maybe more. At that point, I realized something. I was lost. I had no idea where I was, no idea how far I had gone or how to get back. And that's when I started panicking. I decided to stop and pull over. I figured I could take a break, try to calm down, maybe look at the map and figure out what was going on. But when I pulled over and got out of my car, I saw something that made my stomach drop. I recognized the landscape. The same sagebrush, the same rock formation, and the same damn billboard for a diner I hadn't even noticed before. It hit me then. I wasn't just lost. I was stuck. I had somehow ended up back at the same spot, even though I was sure I'd been driving for miles. I was in the middle of nowhere, with no cell service, no landmarks, and no idea where I was. I decided to turn around and retrace my steps. I thought, okay, maybe I made a wrong turn. Maybe I missed a sign. So I went back the way I came. But that's when it started to get even weirder. The more I drove, the more everything looked the same. The same billboard, the same cracked road, the same patch of desert brush. It was like I was moving through a loop, a never-ending cycle that I couldn't break out of. It was getting dark, and I started feeling this deep, gnawing sense of fear creeping up. Was I imagining this? I'd been driving for hours at this point, and the unease in my stomach was growing stronger by the minute. I tried not to panic, but there was no denying that something was wrong. The farther I drove, the more it felt like the world was closing in on me. I didn't know if I was in some kind of maze, if I was stuck in time, or if I'd just gone completely insane. Then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw headlights in the distance. A truck was coming my way, and I couldn't have been more relieved. I pulled over and waved my arms, desperate for help. The truck slowed down and eventually stopped. The driver was a man in his late 40s or early 50s, wearing a faded baseball cap and sunglasses. I asked him if he knew where we were, and he looked at me like I was crazy. "You're lost, aren't you?" he said, his voice suddenly taking on a knowing tone. "Happens to a lot of people out here. You've been driving in circles." I asked him how to get out, and he said, "Just go down that road. You'll hit a gas station in a bit. It'll take you back to the highway." I was so relieved I could have cried. I thanked him, got back in my car, and followed his directions without hesitation. I drove for what felt like hours, still feeling that deep sense of unease. But eventually, I saw a gas station, a real one. It felt like I had just stepped back into reality. I stopped, refueled, and spent a few minutes just sitting there in my car, trying to make sense of everything. When I went inside to pay, I asked the cashier about the area, and she just gave me a strange look. "You're not the first person to get lost out there," she said. "It messes with your mind sometimes." Just don't go driving out there when it's dark. You can get disoriented. Disoriented. Was it just me, or was there something more to it than that? I didn't know if I was just imagining things, but that whole experience felt so surreal, like I was stuck in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I left that night and made my way to a nearby town, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone there. That town I passed, it's not on any map. The road I was on doesn't show up on Google Maps. Even the gas station I stopped at isn't on the satellite view. It's as if the whole place had been erased. I don't know what happened out there that day. I still don't. But every time I drive in a remote area, I get this strange, gnawing feeling that I might end up back there again. So, has anyone else had an experience like this? Ever get stuck in a loop or find yourself in a place that doesn't seem to exist? Or am I just going crazy? Stay safe out there, everyone. Some roads should probably be left untraveled. I'm not sure if I'm overreacting or if I'm just traumatized, but something happened on my road trip last week that I can't shake. I feel like I need to tell someone and maybe get some perspective on whether I'm just being paranoid or if this is a real warning to stay off the road. So, I've been traveling solo for a while now. My plan was to take a week-long road trip through the southwestern US to clear my head, see some sights, and enjoy some peace. I've always loved the open road, and solo road trips have always been my thing. I was somewhere in Northern California, a couple of hours outside of a small town I was headed to, when I decided to pull over to a small rest area. It wasn't much, just a little parking lot with a picnic bench and a few trees. There were no other cars, and the whole place felt deserted. I thought it would be a good spot to stretch my legs, grab a snack, and check my phone. I hadn't even been out of the car for 5 minutes when I saw him. A guy walking toward me from the trees. He looked to be in his 40s, unshaven, and wearing a jacket that was way too big for him, like he'd been living out of it for days. His face was kind of gaunt, and he looked tired. He came up to me slowly, his hands out in front of him, like he was trying to seem non-threatening, but I still felt uneasy. "Hey, I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice shaky. "I'm stranded, and my car broke down about 5 miles back. I've been walking for hours, and I really need some help. Could you give me a ride into town?" At that point, I should have just said no. Something felt off about the whole situation, but the guy seemed desperate, and I didn't want to leave him stranded in the middle of nowhere. I've always been someone who tries to help, so against my better judgment, I agreed. I figured it would only take a few minutes to drop him off. He got in the passenger seat, and I started driving. We didn't talk much at first, just the usual pleasantries. His name was Kyle, and he said he was traveling for work, but his car had broken down on some back road. The more he talked, the more I noticed he was sweating, and his hands were shaking. He kept looking out the window like he was expecting someone, or maybe watching for something. I tried to make light conversation, but it was clear something wasn't right. He was jumpy, and his eyes kept darting back and forth, almost like he couldn't relax. After about 15 minutes, Kyle asked me to pull over. I thought maybe he needed a break, but when I slowed down, he suddenly tensed up, like he'd been waiting for the right moment. He looked at me, and I swear to God, there was something in his eyes that shifted, something cold. "Do you mind stopping here for a second? I need to grab something from the back," he said, almost too quickly. I was suspicious, but I stopped anyway. There wasn't a soul around, just miles of empty highway. I figured I'd be fine. After all, He was just a guy asking for help, right? But then he reached into the back seat, and I heard the faint sound of metal scraping against the upholstery. That's when I knew something was wrong. Before I could react, he turned on me with a knife. I don't know how I managed to think quickly, but I threw the car in reverse and slammed on the gas. My heart was pounding, and all I could think was that I needed to get away from this guy. I didn't even look back. I just drove as fast as I could until I saw the lights of a gas station in the distance. I pulled in and slammed the car into park, not caring that I nearly hit the pumps. I jumped out of the car, screaming for help, but when I looked back, Kyle was gone. He disappeared into the woods. I have no idea how he got out of the car without me noticing, but he was gone. I called the cops, and they were nice enough, but when they arrived and searched the area, they didn't find any sign of him. No broken down car, no trail, nothing. They thought I was either making it up or that I'd misinterpreted the situation. But I know what I saw. I know he had a knife in his hand. The worst part, the gas station attendant told me that this was an area known for carjackings and hitchhiker attacks, things that had been happening for months. Apparently, people have been disappearing after offering rides to stranded strangers. The cops asked for a description and said they were working on it. But that's not the worst part. That night, I was scrolling through some local news articles, trying to distract myself. I stumbled across an article about a couple who'd gone missing in that area just a few weeks before my encounter. Their car had been found abandoned, just like the others. They had stopped to help someone who claimed to be stranded. They never made it out alive. Now I'm left wondering, was Kyle part of some bigger scheme? Was I supposed to be his next victim? How many others has he done this to? It's been a week since the incident, but every time I close my eyes, I see his face. I see the look in his eyes when he realized I wasn't going to make it easy for him. Should I have done more, or was I just lucky to get away? I can't shake the feeling that something really bad happened out there, and I might have narrowly escaped it. I don't really know who to talk to about this, but I've been thinking about it a lot lately and figured I'd share the experience here. Back in 2017, I went on a solo road trip, and I can't stop thinking about this one thing that happened. It was one of those situations where, in the moment, you feel like you're overreacting, but when you step back and reflect on it, you realize how weird and unnerving it really was. So, for a bit of backstory, I've always loved taking road trips by myself. There's something so freeing about being alone on the open road. No specific destination, just cruising and enjoying the journey. A few years ago, I decided to take a solo trip through the Pacific Northwest. I mapped out a route that would take me from Oregon all the way up to Washington and back down again. I was about a day or so into the trip when this strange thing started happening. It was a beautiful afternoon, the sun was shining, and I was driving through some of the more remote areas of northern Oregon. The scenery was stunning, dense forests on both sides of the highway, winding roads that made me feel like I was in the middle of nowhere. I had been driving for hours, just enjoying being alone. There were hardly any cars on the road, and it felt like I had the entire place to myself. Then, I noticed a silver car behind me. I didn't think much of it at first. It is a busy highway, and it's not uncommon for cars to pop up behind you. But what stood out was how long it stayed behind me. No matter how I adjusted my speed, whether I went faster or slowed down, this car seemed to match my pace, staying just far enough behind me that I couldn't see the driver's face clearly. but I could still make out the shape of the car in my rearview mirror. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. It's not uncommon for people to be on the same stretch of road, but after about 20 minutes, the car was still behind me. That's when I started feeling uncomfortable. I had no reason to believe this was anything but a coincidence, but my gut was telling me that something was off. So, I made a decision. I took a right off the main highway to stop at a small rest area. The area was quiet, with only a few picnic tables and a bathroom. I thought I'd get out, walk around a bit, maybe grab a snack, and give the car a chance to pass me by. But when I parked, the silver car didn't just drive past. It slowed down as it neared the entrance to the main area, and then it stopped, right at the edge of the lot. I remember feeling a wave of unease wash over me. It was as if the car was waiting for me to make my move. I didn't want to look like I was running scared, so I decided to play it cool and just get out the car. I took my time walking toward the restroom, trying to act as normal as possible, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I glanced over my shoulder, and sure enough, the silver car was parked, engine running, just sitting there. After what felt like an eternity, the car finally drove off. It turned out of the parking lot and disappeared down the road. I was relieved, but I still had this nagging feeling in my gut. Why had it just been sitting there like that? Was it just a coincidence? Maybe, but the timing felt strange. I didn't want to dwell on it, so I got back into my car, took a deep breath, and continued on my way. But things didn't stop there. About 30 minutes later, I noticed the same silver car had reappeared. This time, it was closer, right behind me. I checked the rearview mirror and tried to make out the car's details, but it was still too far behind me to see the driver clearly. I felt that familiar unease creeping up my spine. I convinced myself that it was just my imagination. There were plenty of other cars on the road, right? But then I turned onto a small road that led to a gas station I'd seen on the map. I figured I could stop, stretch my legs, and grab a coffee. As I pulled into the station, I saw the silver car's headlights flash briefly before it made a sharp turn and drove past the gas station without stopping. I brushed it off again, telling myself I was just overthinking things, but I had that tight feeling in my chest, the one that tells you that something isn't right. I filled up my tank, took a quick break, and got back on the road. A short way down the road, there it was again. The same silver car pulled up right behind me. This time, it wasn't just tailing me. It was practically glued to my bumper. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted, and it made my skin crawl. I turned off the main road again, taking a random exit to see if I could lose the car. It followed me, of course. It kept matching my every move, never getting too close, but always staying right there. It was like it knew exactly where I was going. At that point, I was freaking out. I didn't know if it was a coincidence or if someone was genuinely following me with ill intentions, but either way, I wasn't about to take any chances. I kept driving, looking for any sign of civilization, a well-lit area, anything, but the roads were getting darker and more isolated. The panic started setting in. I couldn't lose the car. Then, finally, after what felt like forever, I spotted a small town up ahead. I pulled into the first place I saw, an old diner with a neon sign. When I pulled into the diner's parking lot, I was trying not to make it obvious that I was scared, but I could feel the panic creeping up in me. I parked in the back of the lot, away from the streetlights, and kept glancing out the window. My eyes kept darting to the street to see if that silver car would show up again. I didn't want to overthink it, but after everything, I was becoming more certain that something was wrong. I'd been thinking about it too much, and I kept imagining that car following me all the way into the diner parking lot. It made me feel vulnerable in ways I couldn't shake off. When I walked inside, I tried to act normal. I ordered coffee, sat in the corner, and kept my head down. Every few minutes, I'd glance up at the window, my heart racing. The waitress was really friendly, but I could feel her eyes on me. Maybe she could tell something was off. She asked how I was doing. I told her I had a weird day and that I thought a silver car was following me, but I guess I was wrong. I don't know how much time passed, but it felt like an eternity before I worked up the nerve to go back outside. But as I was about to leave, I ran into the waitress again. She came up to me and said, "You know, you're not the first person who's talked about that. We've had a lot of weird reports from travelers lately. People saying they've been followed by a car, sometimes for hours, sometimes just for a few miles." That did it for me. I just wanted to bolt. As I left, I kept an eye out for any sign of that car. Fortunately, I didn't see it again. The rest of my drive was a blur. I kept driving through small towns, staying in well-lit places, and avoiding any dark or isolated roads. I knew I'd done the right thing by getting off the road when I did, but I couldn't stop thinking about how close I'd come to being stuck in an even more dangerous situation. To this day, I still don't know if I was being followed intentionally or if it was just a coincidence, but I've never had a more unsettling experience on the road. The worst part is that I have no idea what they wanted or if they were just watching me, but there's no way I'm ever driving through that area again. Not without being extra cautious. So yeah, I'm a lot more aware of my surroundings when I travel now, and I'll always trust my gut next time, no matter how much I tell myself that I'm overreacting. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that. If you have a scary story you'd like me to read on the channel, please send me an email or post it to my subreddit. You can find details of this in the video description. It's the stories that make this, and this is the best way to ensure variety in the stories I share. Thank you all for listening, and a special thanks to my channel members and patrons who now have special access to ad-free videos and other behind-the-scenes content. Once again, thank you guys for listening. Have a great night.